Hey, welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this three-part series, we sit down with two outstanding Americans, Calvin Dockery and Dave Ritchie. Both Calvin and Dave are U.S. Army veterans who flew MH-47 helicopters in the world-renowned 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment's mission is to organize, equip, train, resource, and employ Army Special Operations Aviation Forces worldwide in support of contingency missions and combatant commanders. Known as Night Stalkers, these soldiers are recognized for their proficiency in nighttime operations. They're highly trained and ready to accomplish the very toughest missions in all environments, anywhere in the world, day or night, with unparalleled precision. They employ highly modified Chinook, Black Hawk, and assault and attack configurations of Little Bird helicopters. Soldiers of the 160th have been actively and continuously engaged since October of 2001. Today, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment continues a sustained and active forward presence in the U.S. Central Command area of operations at multiple locations in support of Operations Enduring Freedom. The 160th also provides support to the U.S. Southern, Pacific, Africa, and European commands. Calvin is now a pilot for Alaskan flying the 737 as a first officer, and Dave is now the Chief of Air Operations for the Washington State Department of Natural Resources. In this episode, Dave recounts his involvement as an Army Ranger in Operation Gothic Serpent in Somalia. Many of you know this operation from the movie Black Hawk Down. Dave and Calvin both talk about the 160th selection process and provide some detail on the ship they flew, which was the MH-47 Chinook. The MH-47 differs from its CH-47 sister model with its incorporation of combat systems designed to make the helicopter more survivable on missions deep in enemy territory and during nighttime low-level flight. In this episode, Calvin and Dave debrief a mission in the Congo Valley, also nicknamed the Valley of Death. They talk about how the 160th trains with cities within the U.S. like they did with Jack in Los Angeles. They discuss what makes the 160th different from other Army aviation units. And lastly, we talk about the mission where they flew in to rescue Jimmy Hatch after he was shot and critically injured while on a mission looking for Bo Bergdahl. Jimmy was our guest from episode 100 titled Touching the Dragon. If you haven't heard that episode, highly recommend you go back and listen to it. I'd like to sincerely thank our sponsors, Garmin, Metro Aviation, and CNC Technologies. Cheers.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, Jon Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
They're advising code 4 on the stop.
How else, Dave, talk about how else that crew in a aircraft as large as the Chinook, how that crew in the back assisted you as a pilot to do your job and to particularly land and take off in some very interesting places.
Cal said the FE, which is applied engineer. We had a lot of FIs, which are flight instructors and standardization instructors, just like instructor pilots. So yearly we would do aircrew coordination training enhanced. We called it flying by committee, right? So anytime I did anything, it's like, I'm turning left, you're cleared left, you're cleared left. You couldn't do anything in that helicopter without those guys in the back, especially landing 2 wheels or 1 wheel. That me and Cal did one time up in the Coronado. It's probably one of the worst landings we did in our lives, where we just had to hold one wheel on a rock for about 19 minutes on a mission that I didn't want to do. Me and Cal both got spatially disoriented probably about 20 times. That's about how much we went back and forth. Doing the controls over, doing a mission we tried to turn off about 100 times, but because we knew, we just knew they probably weren't going to make it because the other 3 teams never made it. Then it just becomes, oh, you're saying I can't make it? Well, we're going to go. But without those guys in the back telling you that, I mean, those wheels in the back when we're doing 1 or 2 wheel landings are about 80 feet behind us. And then the fun thing is those little programmers in the transmissions, if you don't seat those wheels correctly, they start programming and trying to pull you off. So you can either turn it off, which I never liked doing because I always forgot to turn it back on. And it's really not good for the rotor system, or you can plant those gear hard enough to program them back to what's called the ground position, so they don't try to program forward at that point. But yeah, they get real excited, and they get us real excited a lot of times, especially when they start rocking the guns. And you're trying to do what you're trying to do is get away from someone shooting at you, and they're telling you to do the opposite so they don't shoot through the rotors. They'll be like right wing up, so they can shoot at the person without us hitting the rotors, and we're just trying to evade it at that point. So great bunch of guys in the back. So
can you debrief that incident a little bit? You talked about with Spatial D and kind of how you fought through that, and how that mission was basically launched.
Before Cal became a flight lead, he was like my favorite pilot. He scared the crap out of me. I always try to get him up front with me. Had a little neck tick going on, which is kind of scary when you're landing in the dirt. He does it now, but yeah, we it was about 10,000 feet or something in the Korengal Valley, or the Peshawar Valley up in Afghanistan, and our typical mission, it was kind of miserable because it was anywhere from 40 to 50 C at midnight. We had always put the customers in, but then we'd have to go sit on the APU because we were their lifeline, their CASEVAC, their medevac, everything like that. And a lot of times we would go in with 2 or 3 and we'd pick up with just 1, because we could take out a lot more than what we could put in with, because we always wanted a little bit of extra power putting in if we started getting lit up, right? So we could do a go around. Well, we're just monitoring the mission, and they start getting behind and checkpoint after checkpoint. And, probably about an hour before dark, they're like, hey, we're not going to make it. And I was like, yeah, really? We've been talking about this. We've been punting this mission for months. And then finally, they're just like, we're going to do it. So we go up, or they call up, and we kind of look at the imagery, and we're like, that's just a field of boulders at 10,000 feet, and you got all kinds of people running around. It's not close. It's not far away from where like the lone survivor happened. It's just across the valley from there, which was my Savannah unit.
Was the initial mission to transport ground personnel and drop them in, or was it a rescue, or what was the?
We put in a team basically at like 11 or 12,000 feet, and they were going down to, take out some target. It's supposed to be a 5 to 7 hour walk. They made it 1,000 feet in 6 hours, so we're like, yeah, we're going to have to go do this. And we went in there, and they're just all strangled in these rocks. And Cal goes in and, puts one will on a rock on a big boulder. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, he's like, I'm not feeling good. So I'm like, cool, I got the controls. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, I'm like, I'm not feeling very good, because we're sitting at 10,000 feet on a sheer razor edge on a boulder, just looking at black space and flying a video game.
There's no horizon.
Yeah, there's no, we're heads down, because we have like a hover page in there that tells us our lateral drift up, down, left, right. But it's only so good when you're hovering. It's great when you're coming into land, but if that little hover ball starts to move, you're coming off a rock as, people on a knife's edge, 8,000-9,000 feet up in the air, trying to push one another into the back of a Chinook. And they got dogs, and they got everything else back there. So
they were literally loading one at a time on this thing. They were one person. I mean, they were hiking people into the back of the Chinook while we're doing this.
Yeah, that was like 30 or 35 people. And we just went back and forth. Basically, we could bring our head up long enough to regain our bearings, and then just, transfer it right back over. So
when you said you weren't feeling it, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's like spatial disorientation. You're just, you're just staring at something that just starts not making sense.
Yeah.
And you're looking underneath your goggles at your systems, you're looking out forward, there may have been clouds or something, but, looking straight out forward, it's the abyss to the next mountain range, which is 3 miles away. So you can't really get a reference off that.
I think that was a zero illume night too. So you couldn't really see the mountain or across, even with our goggles, you couldn't see it. I know that, and we took off, when we blasted off out of there, I think I just kind of fell off. Like I just nosed it over, because we were at 98, 100% torque. And I just pulled it in. Dave's like, pull it in, stop. And I stopped, and we just started nose diving down until we got enough speed up. We had 3,000 feet to go. And then we finally basically just leveled off and started flying again. It was wild.
Incredible.
That was a night in the Night Stalkers there.
Yeah. One term that you both have used multiple times, and I'll just recall the first time I heard it is customers. The first time I heard it was Mike Durant giving a speech at our dining in, and he came as our guest speaker, and he talked multiple times about customers. And when he first said it, I was like, "What is he talking about?" And then he explained it, how the 160th in general looks at the people that are in the back that they're transporting as customers. And I've used that a lot since then when I'm teaching TFOs, tactical flight officers, and telling them, hey, the ground personnel, those are your customers. And so because we want to try and please them, we want to try and support them, we want to do everything we can from them, but sometimes we got to say no to our customers too. Talk about the word customers and what the philosophy was and how that fit into the scheme of your nightly missions, which was mainly transporting customers. Well, how did that fit into the 160th culture and philosophy?
One of the charters of the 160th, and it came out of Desert One or Eagle Claw, which was the failed hostage rescue in Iran of all the college students, was there was no Special Operations, Air Force, Aviation, or Army. Even though they are our customers, we're running the business, and we have to make sure those customers, we give them the best service we can, right? So we want to assure them, if it includes us, we're going to make sure they accomplish their mission within our means. And what we mean by that is we don't want them to put themselves in a bad situation, right? And that's why the 160th takes pretty senior Army aviators. A lot of them have special ops backgrounds, but then pull them in, assess them, and then it's 2-3 years to just be a pilot in command, and then anywhere from 4 to 10 years to be a flight lead. Because, it's hard to walk in for pilots on some special ops people, anybody you can think of walking in there and saying, no, it's kind of a dumb plan. Let's come up with a better one. I always, when I got towards my end there, I got two measures of success on this rotation. One's I'm never going to fast rope you, because if I'm going to fast rope you, I'm probably going to be hoisting somebody out because we're going to hurt somebody. If we can land, we're going to land. Two, not three, is just like that story I just told. I don't want a story I'm going to tell after this rotation, right? Yeah. And me and Cal's got quite a few for some reason. I think it's because it's Cal, but we ended up in our fair share of little deals over there before Cal became a flight lead. And then once you're a flight lead, you don't fly together,
right?
Unless it's your yearly Evo. So,
Jack, can I expand on that a little bit?
Thank you to our sponsor, Garmin. Now, Bell 505 and Airbus AS350 operators can focus more on the mission while reducing pilot workload with the Garmin GFC 600H flight control system. Think attitude hold, hover assist, stability protection, and more. Details at Garmin.com.
When I got there, they were called customers, and I didn't really fully understand why. I just went with it. But Al, he talked to me. He was a great mentor, by the way, Al Mack. He mentioned once to me when we were over my first deployment with the 160th, we're here for one reason. That's to support them. That's it. The only reason we're here. So we have left and right limits. Everything within our power inside of these limits, we will do what they want to do. And we give that to them. They know our left and right limits. So they know what we can and can't do. When we have to say, hey, I don't think we can do that, that's when they kind of move to the outside of that. And that's kind of what Dave was good at, saying, that's just, you're outside of that limit. But if it's inside that limit, we're going to do it. And we're going to try really hard. And we please the customer. Man, that's just what we're there for. The customer's always right. But just like McDonald's customers, sometimes you got to kick them out of the store, Dave was good at that. So,
yeah. I only said this one. I've already been part of one movie, Black Hawk Down. I'm not going to be part of Chinook Down tonight. So,
yeah. That's a good thing to live by. That is so valuable for our law enforcement aviators that are out there about saying no. I've written articles about that in Vertical, as a matter of fact, a whole bunch of them about saying no and how many times it's just the right thing to do. However, it's not easy because of that philosophy. You want to please them. You want to support them. You know how important it is. You know that's your role. That is why you're there. But you don't want to be a part of the next movie. Exactly. It's such a great analogy. And hopefully our listeners will take that away, because I can tell you firsthand, personal knowledge, that being around the two of you and others, including Bob Perrott and RB, and talking and discussing safety and risk and all these things that we've discussed many times over the years, I became a better pilot, and particularly a better risk analysis pilot. And I wasn't scared to say no. And it was tough at times. There were times when that was not the popular decision, but it was the right decision. And yeah, I give the two of you a lot of credit for that. I really do. You probably don't realize how much influence you had on the people that you were around when you were in Los Angeles on a regular basis. But I can say firsthand that you had an influence on me. And Mark Bolanos, our safety officer, who you know, same thing. He would say the exact same thing, which brings me to something that I just talked to Marco the other night, and I told him we were doing this, and he was very excited about it. And I said, Marco, do you remember the day that Dave Ritchie walked in the office, and we had been asking him about the operations manual? And I'm curious if Dave remembers this. And Dave said, oh, I'll bring it up. And he came up to the office. Marco and I are standing there, and Dave comes in with this huge manual, throws it down on the desk. And we said, holy mackerel, that's freaking huge. He goes, yeah, there's a lot of guidelines, procedures, policies, and rules in there. And you followed it up, Dave, by saying a lot of those pages have blood on them. And I don't know if you remember that, but Marco and I remembered it. And that's a long time ago. And the impact being, bad things happen, and then rules get created. Tragedies happen, and then rules get created. Talk about that, Dave. I don't know if you remember that, but talk about that manual and how the rules and how strict you guys were with the rules for both your own crew and your customers.
Yeah, and I didn't know it at the time. When I got in the Rangers, I thought it was just SOP that we killed somebody every 6 months. When I got there, there were three dudes in full body casts. My commander had landed on a satellite dish and got impaled by it. My battalion commander died in Salt Lake with another battalion commander with the Air Force Special Ops. I was down at JRTC, and our other platoon fast roped into the woods with the 160th, and for whatever reason, they roped them into the trees. And that's where one of the rules came from, was the old Miles gear used to have a bar, like a nylon bar around here, and it literally hung one of the guys and snapped his neck. My first sergeant from Somalia, we were doing an airfield seizure jump at Fort Benning, and he went into the Chattahoochee and didn't do what he was supposed to do to get out of his stuff because he thought he was going to make the shore, and he drowned. And then I think my first deployment, this isn't necessarily in the book, the Rangers, I think, adopted it, but we assaulted in on Blackhawks, and it was a live fire exercise. As soon as they landed, they were maneuvering, and before the helicopters took off, and it's nighttime, so everybody's looking through scopes. So the team leader started running, and when the helicopter took off, it pushed the team leader right in front of the saw gunner, which is a 223 automatic machine gun, and just clipped him right in the femoral artery in his leg. And, we were just killing people left and right. But as I go back and look at it, Cal will probably remember, it says right in the Special Ops manual, no roping with Miles. The boats, like our boats couldn't get to the first sergeant because the Rangers do everything, but when you do everything, you're not necessarily great at it. We weren't the greatest at boats, and they couldn't get the engine started. Now the boats have to run parallel to us while we're dropping people in the water. And then, I think the Rangers don't really maneuver until those helicopters are gone now. But yeah, I just thought it was, like I said, SOP. Someone's going to get killed this year, and hopefully it's not you. But yeah, a lot of people got messed up there.
Yeah. Cal, anything to add about that?
Well, yeah. So that's, what Dave said, but all those procedures in that manual were written for a reason, and it was written for safety. I mean, safety is 100% I always said customers are the most important thing, but I think safety of the customers is really the most important thing, and safety for ourselves because of that. And we, that manual was written, both manuals were written for a reason, and it was for safety. And like, I think something bad probably had happened almost every page, like Dave said, every page we had in there was because something bad had happened. But it was nice because as a new guy, you show up and you go, well, how do we do that? I don't know. Let me look it up. And you go to page 385 and it has a detailed procedure of exactly how you do that. And, nobody was perfect at everything, but you could kind of go back and review it. If you knew you were going to do that profile for a couple of days, you could go review it for a few nights before you actually went and did it. So it was fantastic to have those books and the manuals we had. And I think most everybody carried it with them,
Yeah, we were basically the enforcers of that manual too. It didn't matter what unit it was. You'd have to go in and be like, where's your fast rope master? When's the last time you did it, bud? He's like, did out of the tower 6 months ago. Well, had to do it out of the aircraft in the last 3 months. So how are we going to get you current? Because there has to be dual ownership between our crew members doing it. The pilots have to be current, but also they got to have, whether it's that jump master, rappel master, fries master, because it's got to come back on that unit. We're going to ensure all our stuff's straight, but they don't like to read the manuals as much as we do. I don't say how much we liked it, but we were forced to because, at the end of the day, we were there to assure their success and safety.
Right.
Jack, one thing to add fast, I won't be long on this, but the different customers we had varied greatly in the way they approached the training and exercises. And you can imagine who probably was the best and maybe who was the worst. But because of that, you had to treat everybody like they didn't read that manual, So when you showed up, you had to, so that's just, I guess, something to think about from law enforcement. If you have a TFO going down to work for the ground force and wanting to make sure they're doing the right thing, maybe both people get out the manual and make sure they have complied with all their requirements as well as you, because that's we found on the regular. We would go down to talk to whomever was in charge with that particular ground force, whether it was training or combat. And just like Dave said, hey, when was the last time? And they have to keep a log. When was the last time? Maybe you don't ask them to see the log because you're tactical, but so when was the last time you did it? And if they just threw out a number, you're like, well, that doesn't sound like you really knew when that date was. So let's take a look at the log, And there were requirements for that. And, the crew members, our crew members had a lot of responsibility when they would go out and do the fries inspections. They would send ground force out, and they knew that manual or leave their portion of it by memory. And if they would be inspecting the ground force's fast ropes, and if there was, not a chem light at the bottom or so many feet above it, they're like, hey, you guys didn't do this right. They're like, yeah, we did. They're like, they would pull the manual out right there and go, it says right there.
Right.
I don't want to be mean about it, but you got to fix them or I'll fix them for you. So
I
don't know. It's just something to think about. Maybe breaking the manual out and having both elements look at it.
Exactly. And go ahead, John.
I like what you're saying there. Brian Smith, our good friend, he's a chief pilot in Florida. He always talks about, we don't recreate or create new ways to kill ourselves. So we just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I think in law enforcement, we've been pretty bad about memorializing the causes of these incidents. So the crew or the generation of pilots and air crews at that department may know why a particular incident happened. But as that that crew retires and a new group of people come in, that institutional memory may not have been transferred in a way that was effective. So the next crew now is in a position where they may have to relive or relearn that same incident, unfortunately. And as a broad institution, we haven't been very good about sharing the knowledge across all avenues to prevent that from happening again.
Yeah.
So it's really cool that you guys have this manual, and while probably it's annoying at times to have to refer to it all the time, but hopefully it's saving lives, as a result of what you guys are doing through those briefings. And I think about our trainings that we do with our special operations groups. There's a lot of turnover in there. Every year you're having guys promote, they're newly selected to their unit, and we work them a lot. So we train with them quite a bit.
So I think a lot of times the assumption is, oh, we just trained them, they know what they're doing. Well, not being a part of that unit, you don't realize there's been 5 promotions and 2 new hires since that last time you trained them. So that assumption is completely false. They don't know how to operate on an aircraft, and they're not comfortable with it. But I don't realize that because of all the promotions and turnovers that's taking place. So I like the idea that we should treat each briefing as if that person had never read the manual one time. That's smart. I know Jack at LAPD, you guys, with all the specialized units you guys have there, there's a ton of turnover. Can you talk about your experience with that there?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Oh, you just described it. It's very, very accurate description. And I think we went through an evolution over the decades in our support of specialized units and how we did it and what we did. And like I said before, these two gents right here influenced me and Marco, who's our safety officer for a long time, to change some things. We saw things from talking with Cal and Dave, and we learned things, and we said, wow, these guys are the best in the world, and look what they do. Maybe that's why they're the best in the world. So we need to be more like them in dealing with our customers. And we changed things. We did. And Marco and I talk about it all the times. The times that we said no, we were able to back it up 100%. Because we had this knowledge and this attitude about safety and risk management, and we learned it from multiple sources. Don't get me wrong, but talking to these two guys helped us a lot because it showed us where it's being done. It's practiced, and you're dealing with very elite pilots, dealing with very elite operators, and how those things can mix. And things can still go really badly. So that's how we dealt with it, especially with SWAT. And we had a good relationship with them. We would explain things. We wouldn't just say no. We'd say, give us a couple days to think about that. And then they'd come back and say, hey, we're gonna say no, but here's why. And we would lay it out. And I can't remember a single time where they went, oh, you freaking jerks. No, they went, oh, I get it. And then we would also offer an alternative. And that's something I know the two of you have done too. I remember specifically talking to Calvin and Dave about where they'd look at a mission profile and say, this doesn't look right. What about this? And they'd give an option to the customer and end up doing that because it was better. So that's the kind of stuff where it translates. Yes, law enforcement and military are different, but when it comes to risk management, risk analysis, dealing with customers, it's the same. It's the same. It's going to look different in the end, but a lot of it's the same. And that's what I got so much from these two, from that.
Well, yeah, I was going to give a quick example of, there was a mission we were doing up in Conduits once with our customers out of Fort Bragg. And for some reason we were working with our little birds as well. And they wanted me the lead Chinook to come across this plateau and then stop, turn 90 degrees, and then do like 180-foot hover straight down onto this sandbar on this river. And if there was a building overlooking the sandbar, and they knew there was bad guys in this building, and I'm like, hey, that doesn't make any sense. I said our gun, as soon as we get down below that, we can't cover it with our guns. I said, let me offer this to you. I'm going to come all the way around. I'm going to come in low. The little birds tell me when to be there. I'll be there plus or minus 0 seconds. I can assure you, 0 seconds. I will land on that sandbar. Or come in from the river. In the end, they didn't like it. They didn't want to do it that way. I don't know why. I kind of think it was because they didn't come up with it. I don't know. But, I offered a solution. They said, what, never mind. They scrapped that mission. We went on to another one because, they had dynamic missions up there. We could do whatever, we could do multiple a night. In fact, we did when we were up there. But sometimes it doesn't work. But when I looked at it, the risk analysis right now was there was, something like 18 armed males in this building overlooking this valley, and they wanted us to hover down. I'm like, yeah, hover down, man. Like self-preservation, man. That's me looking at that building. I'm on the left side here. So could have been Dave on that side. I'd have been good with it. But
brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cal always tries to say I put the enemy off his side.
He did. We can talk about that later too. That was Jimmy Hatch.
That's coming up for sure.
He did that.
Jack, you've alluded to working with Dave and Cal quite a few times in your time at LAPD. Can you talk about maybe the three of you guys could talk about how you interacted and what you did? And I'll precede your answer by saying, I know the special operations groups operate in a lot of our major cities from time to time training. And I always laugh because there's, the conspiracy theorists out there talking about, what's happening and all these different stories. So this is kind of a set the story straight type conversation.
Good.
But can you talk about your experience working with them and what that looked like?
Yeah, I'll set these two up for what they want, whatever they want to talk about. In that Los Angeles was one of those cities that the military in general knew that they could contact us and help them. Well, that had been happening for decades, long before I was even a cop. SWAT and SEAL teams worked together. The 160th was coming to Los Angeles long before I went to air support. But once I was there and I was a pilot, Steve Scallon from SWAT was like the military liaison, and he was handling it all. And he did a great job. Steve was awesome at it. He loved it. Steve's a great American. He's a veteran. He loved doing it. But one day he came to me and said, hey, I need help. When these guys come to town, they're bringing air assets and they're bringing, ground troops. And I could really use your help for the air assets. And thus I met Dave Ritchie, and which led to meeting Calvin Dockery and Bob Perrott and others. That's how we got to know each other. And I'll just leave it to I'll let them talk about the value of coming to an urban area and doing that, and the value of having that liaison. I won't put words in their mouth, but I can tell you I love doing that. It was wonderful. I learned so much. I got to listen to their briefings. I got to listen to their debriefings. I got to watch them operate. I took them out to do different things, to look for places to land, all sorts of stuff. But I'll let them talk to the value of that and how that kind of evolved. But that's the connection you're talking about, John. That's what we did. And we had full approval from the top, from the mayor's office and the chief, to assist the military and do whatever we could to help them facilitate urban training. And I'll let them take it from there.
I'll back up real fast. I think Mike Rutledge and Gene Reynolds were the first ones that met you in 2005.
Yep.
When they came down to LA with, I think, Shady or John Mailer, and our first battalion guy said, hey, we've been working with Jack, so he's the guy to talk to. And so that first UMT, when Dave was still at Savannah, we were still at Campbell, but we came down and did that UMT. So that's the first time we met you. And I'm sitting in the back at this point. I'm a relatively new guy, I think brand new FMQ. But we met Jack, and he took us out on the LAPD helicopters and showed us the route corridors and he gave a long brief on getting through LA. And were you out of LA as well for a while?
Ontario. So just east of there.
Okay. So the whole valley, it's a mess flying through there.
Yeah, it is.
When you're an Army guy, you're not used to flying through a city like that. It's kind of terrifying the first time you go through. You're like, what in the world? So had he not done that, it would have been miserable. But it's huge. The value of that training was incredible because the navigation inside of the city is completely different than what we're used to. You're following your map, you're following your moving map, and you've got cues and it's telling you to turn, but you're like, hey, is that right? That doesn't look, I'm looking outside and there's a building where it says to go. Well, maybe I zoom in a little farther and it did say turn left, but it's just really dynamic. It's bright. There's other things you're going to hit. There's wires, there's towers. So the fact we got to do that was amazing. And I don't know how many times we did training there, but multiple times. Lots. And I think that very first time, Jack, we were doing fast stroke approaches, a flight of 4. separated by 5 minutes to City Hall, east or west, one of the two. I can't remember.
Yeah.
We staged there at the docks. Yeah. And Jack coordinated this whole thing. Him and Steve, I think, were up there on the building top, weren't you? I believe.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Sometimes
so
we
came
were,
in.
yeah.
That's the night that USC had a game that got changed to 7:00 at night as we came in. And I'm talking to LA. I'm talking to, I think it was LA Tower. I think it was, maybe it was approach control. And they said, whatever my call sign was, break left, break left, break left. There's an object, at your 1:00 or whatever. What I said, you mean the blimp? Because the blimp was right. When we took off, there was no known for a blimp, but we took off 4 hours before that. So we'd been doing training up to that point. So they switched the game time. There was a blimp on it. So they rerouted us. But yeah, we almost hit a blimp. But it was surprising to see the blimp out there, right? Hovering over the stadium. But yeah. And I think one of the missions, Jack. Yes. And I think, Jack, you flew in the jump seat on, was it mine? One of my aircraft was mine or Ryan Brinkatz or somebody you flew.
I was with Bob.
Bob, you were in the jump seat.
You were in Chalk 2 that day. Yeah.
Yeah. We were doing an FMQ eval, I think.
Yes.
And Bob was the flight lead and the instructor pilot giving any eval, I believe. Yeah. That was Ryan Brinkatz, I think, wasn't it? Doing the evaluation.
I'm not sure. It could have been.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I think Ryan was there, so it could have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Dave, anything?
Invaluable training, LA.
What do you remember about coming down, Dave?
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
I just remember Jack just wanted to fly over the Playboy Mansion all the time.
Oh.
I'm like, I need places to land, man. We can't land there. No, it was always great, from the Nike side out to the docks, out to the little whatever the Navy place was out there. I mean, my favorite part, and why most people didn't want to go with me, is we used to roll up the pilots, and they'd become prisoners.
Yes.
And then that would become our mission. So pilots would disappear now and then out there.
Yes, they would. Yes, they would.
For a couple days. And
some
of them ended up in jail. Some of them got interrogated. Some of them got tied up and thrown in the back of the helicopter. But
one of the funniest stories with that is talking to a guy in our roll call room one day who had been through that, and where you guys landed at the police academy out in the valley, and some SWAT guys were staged there. And when Dave says rolled up, and he just means they were kidnapped out of the helicopter and thrown into police cars and taken to police stations and interrogated. And it was part of the training that Dave had set up. And this particular pilot said, "Oh my gosh, that was one of the worst nights of my life. I thought I was going to get tased." And we said, "Why did you think that?" He said, "Because the guys up front, the SWAT guys," he said, "I was in the back, and the guys up front said, 'Hey, Ritchie said we can tase these guys.'" That's all they said. And they weren't tasing anybody, but they said that. And he said, "All I could think of was, Dave Ritchie is going to let these guys tase me. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it." But that was his memory of that.
Well, and they didn't even know, because we had 2 separate check rides going on.
Right.
So we were leaving the next day. So I was like, hey, we don't have time. And every evaluation aircraft's got one of us in the jump seat. So I'm like, we don't have time to go give them their plaque tomorrow. Get out and give them their plaque. And it was just like Steve standing out there. SWAT was all hiding off the side of the track. So they get out and they're unwrapping the plaque. Well, it's the middle of the night. I don't even know if they looked at it. It just said, "I would run if I was you." And we just took off. We just took off at no point. And then once the second ones got rolled up, we came in and landed. And I still got the videos of them, because I think it was the Granada Hills PD there.
Yeah.
I think the funniest part was when they got released, they were bagged and cuffed and everything.
Yeah.
And we walk out, and we have some of our ops people going to drive it back to the hotel because we need to get the helicopters back or whatever. And I was like, "Hey, I want the heat to max and the mariachi music to 90." Right. and were you down there for that, Cal?
Yeah.
It was Gosling and Yearwood's check rides. But we walked out, and Steve looked at me and he goes, "Man, I dealt with a lot of people. You're a dick." And I was like, but it was like 2 hours later, they roll up. You would have thought those two were in the Hanoi Hilton for 5 years. And I felt bad.
They were sweaty.
One of the guys was a captain. He had like a 2nd-degree burn on his arm because the heater vent was blowing on his seatbelt, but they couldn't talk or anything. And
oh my gosh,
it was
valuable
fine.
Valuable training.
Yeah.
Calvin, you talked about the complexities of the LA airspace, and Jack, I know you flew there all the time, so you're just like, it's normal for you.
Yeah.
But for my agency, we routinely went out there. We'd call them training flights. And we would fly the airspace looking for hazards. Calvin brought that up. There's a ton of towers out there that are hard to see. Knowing where those towers are is vital. In law enforcement, if you're following a pursuit or surveillance that takes you in an area you're not familiar with, it's really easy to lose track of where those towers and those hazards are. So a lot of agencies I know catch heat for taking cross country training flights because you're out of your normal response area. If something kicks off in your jurisdiction when you're on a training flight, it look bad for being out of place when something happens.
Yeah.
But then you think about these, critical incidents that we're often a part of. If you go into the LA area and you don't know, where the Bravo ends and where it begins, or where the towers are, or who to contact, for these different transitions, and you lose a suspect because of that, it's equally, or I would say is worse because that's preventable. So
It is.
our administration was really, really good about allowing us to take those training flights and encouraging us to do so. A lot of times we did them with ride-alongs. I had a ride-along where we took them out, and it was actually some friends of mine. We took them out to the Santa Monica Pier, and as we returned, somebody took a screenshot of our aircraft over the Santa Monica Pier. It promptly went to our city council, from our city council to our police chief, from the police chief to my supervisor, and the supervisor to me, asking why we're over Santa Monica. And my first instinct was like, oh no. But he's like, no, we're doing what we're supposed to, So for the supervisors out there that are encouraging their folks to get out and do these kind of missions, I give you applause because, like I said, this is a preventable situation where if you lose a suspect because you don't know where the hazards are or where these, airspaces begin and end, or who to contact, that's bad, So, I encourage you guys to get out there and do those flights. And I'm assuming for you guys, Dave and Calvin, training out there and learning to navigate in those environments was helpful for, maybe not the LA area, but other parts of what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you got the hills and everything else there, make it complex. Great thing though was always to have like LAPD squawk code in the standby. So when you bust the Dodger TFR and Burbank yells at you, there you go. Sorry, I got the wrong squawk code. And then they stop yelling at you for, buzz at the Dodger Stadium. So I'll tell you the best part of that whole thing, and I loved LAPD at the time because we always put an ops guy up in their tower. Yeah. And they're like, hey, we're routing all 911 noise complaints to you. And I'm like, well, there's probably going to be a few, but I don't think anybody's really going to listen to Compton or South Central when we go busting in there with a couple Chinooks or whatever.
So John, I just wanted to piggyback on what you were saying there about how invaluable it is to train in the environment you fight in, if you will. And I guess this is kind of generated towards supervisors and, leaders. People used to ask me, what makes you guys different than the regular Army pilots? What makes you better? And I would say on the regular basis, we're not better. We're not better pilots. We were not. We trained harder. That's just what we did. The difference between the 160th and the regular Army was training. If we wanted to go do a high altitude training, we went to Colorado and we did it. If we wanted to go do desert landing, we would go to Albuquerque, New Mexico and find the worst possible dust and do it. And, the trend wherever we were going, we made it realistic. And I realized a lot of units didn't have the money to send the entire company to Colorado to go do high altitude training. You just have to try to make it as realistic as possible. I mean, and the fact that your command and your supervisors would let you go through LA in case that you get tasked out for that mission, or you get tasked out to help out something different that you were proficient. It's huge. I mean, and hopefully everybody's getting to do some of that as well, but just try to make your training as realistic as possible. That's all that I would add to that.
Yeah, I love
Good
that.
stuff.
That's huge. Yeah.
Good stuff. We've got to get to this. We could talk all day. We told Cal and Dave that we we're going to talk to him for 5 hours. Well, we're not going to do that.
I'd like to, though.
I know we would. We could too, easily. But let's get to something that we've kind of teased about and talked about. Let's get to the night where Jimmy Hatch was critically injured on a mission, and the two of you were on that mission and in the same cockpit. And so I'm just going to leave it to you. You know what night it is. It's etched in your history and in your memories. There's things that both of you remember about it, remember things differently. I'll let both of you just kind of talk about that night, what you remember about it, and how it may have affected you or changed some things.
Well, there's two versions. There's Cal's version and there's Steve's, right? I don't know how far we were into it, but it was. And Jimmy, I listened to his. He's like, I can't remember if it was for Bergdahl or not, and it definitely was.
It was Bergdahl. Yeah,
we're on probably week 2 or 3 of doing whack-a-mole every night, and there's 3 or 4 160th groups in special ops just heading different places everywhere. And you can say whatever you want. A lot of people got shot. A lot of people got hurt. But that night, it was, I'm pretty sure it was like an IED factory making suicide vests and stuff like that. One of the things I remember is every time they shot someone on a motorbike, they just kind of blew up, right? We had 3 helicopters. 2 were going to the main objective, and then a third was going over to some tent in Neverland. For whatever reason, I like to change landing plans a lot when I'd come in to land. And
tell them why, Dave.
Well, it's the winds, right? We had to be into the wind. And with that, it actually brought the second helicopter around us, and they had to go in front of us. Well, as they went in front of us, a PKM heavy machine gun opened up, and luckily it went between us. But this was Cal's thing. It was going to be like, look at this. The gunfire is off to my side now, right? Awesome.
It always was when we landed.
So we put him in. We go, I think, where were we at? Toronto that night to get gas. Was that the night we stole Al's gas?
Yeah.
So there was another group up in Toronto. We were out of Jalalabad. And we went in and took their gas, and then all of a sudden lightning started and they couldn't get gas. So they have their customers out. They can't get gas because of the FARP or fuel point shut down. You know, we get called back in for people running all over the place. What do we call those people? We call them squirters, right?
Squirters, yeah.
And, I was like, Cal, go over there and like flare next to that building. I don't think Jimmy had been shot yet, right?
I can't remember the sequence of events, but I believe he had. I think Jimmy got shot within a matter of minutes of being infilled. Yeah.
So Rothmeyer was in that one, right?
Yeah.
So our medical helicopter was never the lead helicopter because, we're up there leading everything. So the medical helicopter goes in. I think that's when we start chasing people. And then, of course, Cal chose which way we came in. What I decided to flare right next to that building. And about that time, some guy steps out. I don't know if he was taking a dump or whatever, but Cal got real small in the seat and was like, oh, I got to take off. Well, a guy came out with a gun, right? But yeah, it was a pretty horrific. It seems like it was 3 months long. It was probably about a month long of us just doing the worst missions every night at a moment's notice, trying to find somebody.
So, we infilled, and after, like I said, the fire erupted before we were on the ground. The PKM, the small arms fire started. So I knew it was going to be that mission. Every mission we would hit like 2 or 3 objectives because they would get intel that Bergdahl was at a location. And they don't know if it was 3 days ago, today, they didn't know. But every assault force out there was hitting different objectives, including us. And, so everything was dynamic. There was a lot of shooting. Everybody was on high alert, the enemy included. So as soon as we started our approach in there and the PKM goes off, the small arms fire goes off, and I'm in Dave's right seat as the FMQ. He's the flight lead. I knew it was going to be bad. I was like, God, this is going to be another bad one, and you just kind of hope that it's not going to be a bad night, but it was bad already. But I think we had just taken off. Ryan Rothmeyer was chopped too. I don't remember who he was flying with, but we had just taken off and peeled around the objective area for egress. And I remember Jimmy getting on the radio. He was saying, I don't know if it was Jimmy at the time, but I believe it was. moving to a squirter with the dog. And it wasn't very long. Within minutes, we got report from the ground force net that they had one shot. And we hadn't even left the objective area yet.
No.
Dave's in charge of the whole flight. So I believe he spun us back around and set us up to just go screaming past while Ryan went into exfil. And it was pretty quick. I want to say within 5 minutes, we were inbound and because we were just holding 5 minutes away probably. But from the time they made the call, about 5 minutes, we were on the ground. And we didn't know at the time how bad Jimmy was. I mean, we knew, I think we knew the dog had passed. I'm not positive on that, but we knew Jimmy was, it seemed like we got the report that he was walking or something like that. But, I think he was just in typical Jimmy fashion. He had his fentanyl lollipop in his, I think he had two actually. I think he had one on each side, I believe. That's the reports we got, but he was making jokes and stuff because I think he was a little bit out of it, but that we got him back. We didn't really realize how bad it was. And then we went and got our gas and came back. And the story that Dave's telling there was another squirter, like 700 series building. He'd squirted and he was continuing. So Dave sends me around. He'd ran into another building and he's like, we're just going to do a show of force. And he was announcing this to everybody. We're doing a show of force to stop this guy from running. And he's like, he lasers with his little finger lasers, do a fast rope approach right there. I'm like, it's awful close to the building. Just go. My side, of course, could have came in the other way. I'm pretty sure we were with the tailwind there, but so I do a fast rope approach and I come down to the building and the illumination's pretty good that night. So I can see pretty well. When I come down to 40 feet, it's not super dusty. I just look over there and this guy with an AK walks out of the building and just stands there in the doorway looking at us. And I'm thinking, dude's like 40 meters away with an AK looking right at us. And I'm sitting there looking at him. And so I don't think I even told Dave I'm taking off. I just did because he was right. I was trying to get the right gun's attention, but needless to say, we took off. And I believe that stopped him enough that they caught up to him. And I don't know what happened to that guy, but to my recollection, he may have decided to start a firefight, and I'm sure he lost. So
yeah,
disappeared.
But needless to say, that was one of many stories where Dave puts me towards the guy squirting.
I've heard this story for the first time from some SEAL team guys in Washington D.C. when I was attending a funeral, and they knew Dave by name, and I found that fascinating that they knew him by name, and I'm sitting there going, I know that guy. I mean, they're describing this scenario, and I went, I know that pilot. That's unbelievable. And it was quite a while till I learned that Calvin was in the same cockpit. I didn't know that. And then when I talked to Calvin about it, I asked him, he said, I remember these words, Calvin, you've used them many times. Oh, that's the night that Dave tried to kill me.
Yeah, it seems to be a reoccurring theme.
Yes, it does. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Tell us what I know what you mean, but tell everybody, what do you mean by that finger laser?
This is the end of part 2. Join us for part 3, where we continue our conversation with Calvin and Dave. They talk about some of the tools of their trade, among some other really great topics. Also, stick around for some updates after a word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Garmin. Now, Bell 505 and Airbus AS350 operators can focus more on the mission while reducing pilot workload with the Garmin GFC 600H flight control system. Think attitude hold, hover assist, stability protection, and more. Details at Garmin.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors. Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Thanks for taking a few minutes to hear from our sponsors. Their support of the podcast and our industry is very much appreciated. Want to give you all a heads up on what's going on with their friends, Halsey Scheider from the Helicopter Podcast and Jason Quinn from the Real Rescue Podcast. Halsey recently released a really interesting episode with Devin Bowen. That episode's actually a few episodes back, and you can find it at verticalhelicast.com. Quinny also recently had a really interesting conversation as part of his Asterix episode where he interviews former naval officer, award-winning entrepreneur, and technologist Ben Williams. They talk about autonomous drone technology. We're only a few days away from Christmas. I hope you all get to spend some time with loved ones as we all go into this busy celebration. Given most of our work schedules, the celebrations may not happen on Christmas itself, so stay safe out there and enjoy the time you find. Cheers.
Time to close up the Hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.